Jim, how are you? How's everything in your world?
Good. It's going well.
Great.
We're going to try something different, try something new.
Yeah.
Just have
Yeah.
a little bit of a chat about a topic of the day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was going to say the inside of the day, but I feel like we overuse inside. I don't know. There's a lot of overused words in our space. It's significant. No, it honestly, today's conversation spawned from you and I realizing that some of these conversations that we have, just sort of independently of what gets recorded, that's actually where the most interesting stuff happens, and where we just organically find these novel ideas. And for me, especially now living in my role, where I'm no longer sort of directly the face of measurement for my organization, but I am really tightly aligned with measurement folks, but also business folks. I'm finding that I'm sitting at this. I love it. I love it. I'm sitting at this intersection though of the business user and the marketing scientist. And so a lot of my questions and thoughts that I'm hoping you'll be able to maybe guide me on really come out of that world and at this moment in time. So yeah, today I guess I'd love to ask you about just like the state of MMM and the realities of, gosh, Google's coming out with Meridian. We know that, I mean, Robyn, gosh, how many years has Robyn been around now? Like 4?
I should know this. It's been at least 3. I don't know if it's been 4 yet. What was it? I can't remember when it came out. Let me look that up.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
been at least 3 years, I believe.
You're right.
Yeah.
And so like that's pretty mature. And for what it's worth, I think there's just been there's so many MMM platforms out there right now. I probably get asked every other day, should we look at using this platform? And I don't have a good answer in those scenarios, because I'm also struggling with, well, what is the difference? Is there a difference? There was this recent question I was asked by a vendor to do for some marketing work for them, and they were like, what should marketers be looking for in MMMs? And so it just sort of made me thinking, like, oh, have we turned the corner from convincing folks to use an MMM? Like, where are we at? So I don't, like, if you just put on the spot right now and you're thinking about all the MMMs that are out there in the world, and just like, where are we at in the MMM ecosystem right now? Like, what are you thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot happening even in the past year or 2 years, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
aside from Robyn, like Robyn has been kind of kicking off the open source world of
Right.
MMM. They kind of started that ball rolling a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, with Google, they had lightweight MMM, and then recently announced Meridian, which is generally built on top of lightweight MMM as a foundation. Still, it's weird. It's open source, but it's invite only. So it's like
It's
it's a closed open
sure.
one way
Well,
door. I'm
it's
not
it's like
sure.
when you host like a children's party at a park, which is like, yeah, it's an open park that anyone can be there, but you weren't really invited, so you should probably get off the bouncy castle. At least
Exactly.
that's what they tell me to do.
Yeah.
No, but no, and then, like, and this is gonna sound silly, and I'm here to ask these silly questions because I think it's important, and oftentimes we use words and phrases that maybe are not generally or broadly understood. What is PyMC?
All
Because I
right.
keep hearing about it. Yeah.
So PyMC is an open source library, Python library.
Okay.
There's PyMC Marketing, the library, which includes functionality to do customer lifetime value as well as marketing mix modeling. They have been on a tear recently in terms of iterating and updating and including additional functionality. So, for example, they just released time varying coefficients as one of the new core functionality pieces within that package. It's an open source library,
So
so
it's
it
like
has multiple
so it's like a
contributors.
seasonality like predictor. Is that right? Or no?
No, no, not seasonality, but in the sense that sort of a lot of not basic, but a lot of marketing mix modeling, including Robyn, assumes that your baseline sales are basically just sort of, they don't change over time. And they assume that the coefficient for each channel, right, the ROI for each channel is constant across the entire, let's say if you're doing a 2-year model window, you're modeling a 2-year
Sure.
period, then the model spits out the ROI, and it's basically making the assumption that that's the ROI for that channel over that 2-year period. So in the back of your mind, you think, okay, that's sort of like the average ROI for that 2-year period. But obviously we know that
Sure.
the ROI or the CPA of a channel is going to change over time based on
Yeah.
the season, based on our industry or
Well,
our product, or so it's going to change.
I think the other thing, like at the core of this, is just consumer intent and utility, right? Like if 2 years ago you were like, oh yeah, we're thinking about investing everything in TikTok. I'm like, I don't think so. Now I'm looking at it going, yeah, actually TikTok has a pretty viable path forward. So that's one part of it, and then the second part of it is just the features or the campaign types that even exist, right? And so like so that, I mean, that's a very real concern that I guess every other MM, it doesn't weight that in any capacity.
Not every other. So
Okay,
PyMC Marketing also now has time varying coefficients.
sure.
Uber released a package called Orbit that does include time varying coefficients. They were one of them that sort of one of the earlier ones that included that. Robyn does not do time varying coefficients. Lightweight MMM, I can't remember if they do or not. I think they might. There's actually a good comparison page. Let me see if I can
Mm,
find that. I'll bring it up. By the way,
sure.
version
Yeah.
3.0 of Robyn, which was when it was first put on GitHub, was October 27th of 2021. So
Okay.
3, 4. So like almost 3 years.
That's so
So
wild.
it's been around a
I
while. Uh,
back in the day, I was on a product advisory council for Meta. That was at the time it's called the Facebook Product Advisory Council. I've got a sticker somewhere. Their logo was like a donut. Sorry, it was called the Facebook Attribution Product Advisory Council, and it was the whole thing was predicated on advising Meta on their deterministic attribution solution, which was utilizing the Atlas tag. It was still back in the day when I was really drinking the Kool-Aid of like we can deterministically track everything, and that sort of faded into obscurity. There was this discussion at some point that hey, we might use the same philosophy and methodology for influencer tracking. I was like, okay, there's something there. It's definitely more of a niche case, but then right out of it, like that was I don't know, maybe a few months before Robyn then came, and so it was just this explosion. It was like the Cambrian explosion of sort of MMM accessibility. And I'd been told by marketing scientists throughout my whole career to that point that we're just not going to do an MMM. It's not going to be a feasible path forward for us. But that's so incredible that it's been already long, and now we're asking the Cambrian explosion. There's so many.
yeah, absolutely. Here, I'm gonna share my screen.
Yeah, please do.
For anyone watching us on YouTube, you can see this as well.
Yes.
So if you want to
And
see
if
what
you're
we're
not,
seeing,
go watch us on YouTube. Yeah, like it's the place to be.
it is.
And I'm wearing a hat today, so that's exciting.
Are the Dodgers playing? Is that
I mean, they're playing every day. There's 162 games a season, so honestly, you know what it is? It's I didn't want to do my hair today, and I'm like, I don't know. I've had the same hairstyle of a faux hawk since I was 13, if I don't do it, my hair just looks floppy and messy. So today's a hat day.
you know?
Okay, what are we looking
You know,
at? We're looking at
side
PyMC.
tangent.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, side tangent. Since we're on the
no,
baseball, I went
focus.
to I
Yeah,
went
yeah.
to a
Oh yeah,
baseball game. Went to a Pittsburgh Pirates baseball game last week. My
yeah.
son, who's in middle school, his middle school band, played the national anthem at the beginning. They marched out onto the field, played the
That's
national anthem,
amazing.
and then they got to sit in the stands and we watched the game. And it was funny, like talk about like all of the data opportunities around baseball, not related to actual baseball players, like the whole Moneyball stuff. But
Right.
my daughter was with me, and for fun, I pulled up the players' salaries. So every time someone came to bat, I was like, "Oh, this is the top player on the team. He's making 13.5 million a year." And then he would
Yeah,
strike out.
yeah.
He's like,
Of
strikeout,
course.
3 strikeouts, or like he grounded out, struck out, flew out. It's like, man,
I
that's
mean that's a particularly fun exercise to do with the Pirates. I
there's
believe
not a
they
lot of
may have
money.
the second lowest payroll in baseball, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's just the A's that come after them.
Yeah.
They've got a whole story about how they've grown their team. Like it's not Moneyball again, but like how they've grown their team up as this sort of like homegrown function. They always have good draft picks, but baseball stats that
Baseball
could be a fun
stats.
topic for another day.
Could be another one.
It could be.
But yeah, so looking at the screen here, yeah. This is actually on the PyMC Marketing web page where it kind of lists and
Okay.
compares PyMC, lightweight MMM, which is again that's sort of the foundation of what Meridian is. I haven't gotten access to Meridian
Yeah.
yet, so who knows? Robyn, Orbit. So Orbit is the open source package that Uber released,
Right.
and then Recast, which is interesting. It's open source, proprietary vendor, right?
Right.
Which is kind of interesting. But hey, it's good to see Recast in there. Big
I
fan
mean,
of
they're
Recast.
clearly. I was gonna say they're punching up because those are all giant household name brands or PyMC not so much, but definitely. So sorry, really quick on this. The fact that some of them are in Python, some of them are,
Mhm.
is that a concern, or is that like, do you think that's driving adoption in any capacity?
It's a good question. I don't think so. I think some people are wish that Robin was in Python instead of R. And in fact, there's a
Right.
Python wrapper for it now. You can use the API, but
I heard that they were coming out. So, okay, so that
yeah, so
exists.
that exists. I haven't used it. I'm more of an R person, so it doesn't bother me. But um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, most data scientists, I think, can kind of muddle around in one or the other if they're not familiar enough
Yeah.
with it. And you got ChatGPT as your co-pilot, so um,
Is that why you were saying you're thinking about going as a pirate for Halloween? Because your favorite languages are.
oh,
Oh,
oh.
oh, oh. I was like, how do I tie in the Pittsburgh Pirates to this moment right here and Jim's affinity for fancy dress? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll,
So,
we'll,
so,
we'll
so, so
edit that out. Yeah,
brilliant. But
this is nice
yeah,
because yeah, it compares like all the main open source packages and recast to kind of some of the main important things that you look for in an MMM package.
yeah,
So the time varying intercept and time varying coefficient. So the intercept again, that's sort of like you can think of that as sort of baseline sales, and then time varying coefficients is do we allow the ROI of a channel to change over time, or do we just assume it's this static for the entire period? And so, yeah, you can
right.
see Lightweight and Robin do not have time varying coefficients or intercepts. You can see here it says coming soon for PyMC Marketing. That's actually they need to update this page because
Right.
it's here now. I
Well,
believe. Yeah,
and really quick on this, like we just don't know enough about Meridian at this moment in time, right? And that's why it's comparing lightweight.
yeah. It's it's
Okay,
still not available broadly yet.
yeah.
Yeah,
The fact though that okay, just maybe the elephant in the room here is like PyMC, Bayesian. They're all using Bayesian except Robin. Robin's traditional ML.
yeah.
What's the thought there? Like, what is? Because I'm hearing that's why folks are maybe moving toward PyMC. Is that am I on the pulse?
I I would say that the general movement or the general trend is towards Bayesian methodologies for MMM. It gives you a little bit more flexibility into how you can kind of model out what's happening. So, for
Yeah.
example, you can be a little bit more. If you think about marketing mix modeling as trying to represent reality with a mathematical function, right? You're
Hmm.
basically saying like this is how we believe marketing to behave, and observationally we kind of see how that works. So, for example, a good example for this is always branded paid search, right?
Hmm.
Does branded paid search drive incremental sales? Like, does it directly cause people to buy? Maybe, maybe
Maybe
not.
a
Maybe a
little.
little bit. Maybe depends on the industry. Um,
Yeah.
but what probably happens is that, and you look at the other things, you look at your other paid media, like your YouTube ads and your Facebook ads and all the other, whatever else you have on there, TV ads, linear TV ads, radio ads, whatever it might be. And you see that those channels probably drive directly some sales, direct causal arrow to sales, right? But
Hmm.
they probably cause some people to search for you, in which case they click on your branded search and buy. And so you
Sure.
can actually kind of model that behavior out as well with a Bayesian approach. Whereas with the frequentist approach, it's really more of just a multi-linear regression, and you're just kind of looking at the patterns in spend versus the patterns in revenue, and how they're how correlated they are.
Great.
Yeah.
And I know you don't work at Meta, but do you think that is like I don't know, maybe symptomatic of the fact that they're building around a social platform and sort of the realities of this like last I don't know. I'm just trying to think of like what bias has maybe gone into the development of these platforms because that's now what I'm thinking a lot more about. And I like when you talk to folks at these companies, there's always the concern of like the bias of these other platforms. I'm like, I was sold on the MMM dream that there would be no bias, and I don't know how true that is.
Wait,
It's obviously not true, but it's like, is there underlying bias that you can't control for? I guess it's the question
yeah.
in the way that it's built.
So I would say that I typically am very cynical, like you.
Yeah,
We've been in this
as you
game
should
long
be.
enough that we should always assume that if it's coming from a vendor, there are specific things they're doing to try to make it, you know, weighted in their favor. In
Hmm.
this case, I don't think that's the case because
Hmm.
I've watched enough interviews with the team who built Robyn, um, to know that I don't think that that's like, you know, they're not in a dark room behind closed
Hmm.
doors, like saying, "Hey, how can we,
Sure.
adjust this parameter to make it favorable to Robyn?" In fact, it's funny because there was
Right.
not too long ago on Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever. I think it was on LinkedIn. I saw someone like speculating that, oh, clearly Robyn is going to tell me to spend more on Facebook, and that's just kind of stupid because it's an open source model. Um,
Right.
if you change the name of the channel from Facebook to Google, then it's going to tell you to spend more on Google. Like you can see
Sure.
exactly what's happening under the hood. You can know exactly how it's functioning, and
Hmm.
it's not doing any of that, right? And so this is
But
this
but to,
is
but to the point, because I agree on the surface, like it's not intelligently picking up the name of a channel and saying I'm going to weight myself toward Facebook. But there are these underlying forces, though, in sort of the way that media is delivered, in terms of incredibly high volumes of impressions. Not so much focused. Like Meta had that study years ago. I think maybe it was done in partnership with maybe Nielsen. No, I can't remember who it was done in partnership with. But what they basically established was there are clicky people out there, and clicks don't matter. And I swallowed that at the time. I don't know how true that is. I know there are clicky people. I know I've seen them when people do screen shares and they just click around. Like, what are you doing? Why? Why do you have this need to click on everything? And people click apparently a bunch. But like, what I'm getting at here is just in that scenario, is the model not built to underweight clicks potentially?
was that the thing you were referring to? Is that like the underlying basis of that was saying like, listen, view through is important. They saw your ad, but
Yeah, like
clicks don't matter because people just click, right?
yeah, because
Yeah.
in the Meta
Yeah.
ecosystem, like in theory, you can optimize for clicks or website visits, but you can also just optimize for visibility and with the right audience.
Yeah.
Is that what you think is maybe at the core of this?
That's a good question. I don't think that's the core. I think the core is that there's this sort of realization that multi-touch attribution as a methodology for understanding the performance of your marketing
Hmm.
just isn't sufficient, um, to really understand the value of a channel. And I think, you know, this was always sort of to a certain degree understood that like, oh,
Hmm.
it has gaps, like, oh, it's only measuring digital and it's not measuring any
Sure.
offline. And, oh, people have multiple devices and we're not really accounting for that. So like that's
Hmm.
always people have always known that. But then everything with privacy and
Right.
regulation and third party cookies going away, like has kind of oddly enough, third party cookies really have little to do with multi touch attribution because most people aren't including view through and the multi touch
Right.
attribution. But that aside,
Right.
it, for whatever, it's shown the light on the fact that like, oh my gosh, multi-touch attribution or last click, it's not, I can't use that anymore. So people are kind of
Yeah.
scrambling. And I think that kind of like just started to show people like, oh, there's this other thing that you can do now. It used to be out of reach for most, corporations that weren't mega CPG brands and could spend, millions of dollars on it. But now there's open source packages and compute power has gotten to the point where we can do this. And, not
Hmm.
only is there Robyn, but there's lightweight MMM, there's Orbit, there's PyMC. So there's been a lot of options for free off the shelf, right? You just have to bring your data scientist to it. Um, and so I think that's been kind of the core driver. I don't think it's, I don't think it's like, the vendor or the platform is trying to, be the first, option to like, make sure that they get something in their favor. I don't think that's
Hmm.
happening. I will say, however, um, it is interesting with Meridian, some of the documentation that they did put out there, that they kind of touted it as being, well, we with Meridian, we included these brand new features that no one else has, and it's you can include uh, frequency and reach from YouTube and from these. They're basically including specific functionality that they're including functionality that's specific to
Sure.
Google channels, which on one hand it's like, okay, that could be good, but on the other hand, you're treating these channels with white glove service, whereas the other channels, like if you're just advertising on TV, you probably aren't
Mm-hmm.
getting that reach and frequency numbers, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I haven't really had a strong look at it, so that I
Well,
could bias it
I don't
towards
know. Like
the channel where you
in
have
the
more data.
CTV, yeah. I mean, for what it's worth, though, in the CTV world, I think that I've seen some data sets now where I'm like, that's actually really really rich in terms of what is available here and what is essentially how you can dedupe associated with IP addresses and sort of how that is becoming this really powerful big vehicle there. But it is a strange it is strange to see that. It makes me wonder why it's just not API accessible. And like when they talk about like, yeah, we're going to account for that, I'm like, is it just like a feature that will allow you to account for that? And so if I get the same depth of granularity, say from Meta, that I could push that in here, and I guess the question maybe is one, how many open source platforms is too many, right? Like, do we need another open source MMM platform? It's not to say I want to poo-poo innovation and say like we should, but I'm looking at it going like, yeah, when you think of a lot of the great innovations in life, like when Volkswagen invented the seatbelt, and then they open sourced the seatbelt for lack of a better term, right? They gave away the patent, they made it available to everyone. You're like, yep, that's a good seatbelt, the 3-point seatbelt. That's the way we're gonna do it. And yeah, there are some like other sort of harness ones out there and so forth, but like doesn't really matter. You just need this core function, and then you start to build on top of that. And I guess maybe as I'm looking at this, I'm going, are we just not like creating this artificial fragmentation at this moment? Do we need this many MMMs?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm never gonna turn down another option if it potentially provides benefits and if it's better. I think,
Well, I get, but I guess that's the question. There is there a point at which we go like, okay, PyMC that actually becomes the framework, and then we iterate upon that, or is it because I'm getting at this thing of just like the bias that may be inherent, or the if it's coming from Google or Meta, there's always concerns, and so and look, this is a larger kettle of fish or a larger issue in terms of who has the right to build an MMM. Of course, everyone has the right to. Who has the right to do it in appear neutral in the process? Maybe is a better question,
yeah,
and so that's all. That's what we're thinking of.
yeah, and I think you'll just naturally have a sort of you'll see one or two or three leaders in the open source space, and the rest will
Mm-hmm.
sort of fall to the wayside as you see certain open source like Orbit. I don't think that's had a new release, like an update. And
Mm-hmm.
because I could check out the GitHub repo probably and see like when was the last time it was updated, but it's probably been a
Sure.
couple of years, right? Whereas Robin, it was pretty active. I don't think they've had an update for a while. But
Okay.
it has the backing of Meta, and it's been around the longest.
Sure.
Well, asterisk, maybe it's been. I don't know if someone correct me in the comments if there's something that's been around longer than that, but it's been around. The documentation is solid. They got a good, strong package there, right? Lightweight MMM obviously is not being updated anymore, but now we have Meridian, so
Right.
it's too hard to say there. But PyMC has an active community around it and is being constantly updated and new versions released. So I think you'll start to see people coalescing around two or three of those open source packages, and that's probably going to be
Yeah.
PyMC, Meridian, and Robyn, right? Because obviously reasons for Meridian and Robyn, vendor backed. They have the resources to make them well performing by whatever you mean by well performing.
Mm-hmm.
And then PyMC because it has probably the biggest open source community in terms of contributors like actively working on it. So if you want something, for people who want something that they put their tinfoil hat and they don't want the vendors putting their thumb on the weight or thumb on the scale, then they can go to PyMC. And if you have someone who has a strong relationship with their Google reps and Google reps say use Meridian, then sure, use Meridian. I'm sure it'll be fine.
Why is PyMC open source?
That's a good question. We should probably get the founders of that on the podcast sometime.
Yeah. And yeah, it's well, I'm just looking at this was the PyMC initial release was back in 2013. But to your point, there's a lot of other packages or a lot of other features that they built over time. So I don't know when their solution was, but it just I always like to think about the motivation of who's bringing this to market, and then there's always the concern of will you support it over time, especially in an open source world, there's no sort of SLA to guarantee that we're going to continue supporting this. And if you build your entire ecosystem around it, I think it's a very real fear that a lot of folks have. But I am genuinely curious as to, is PyMC just this like, is it like the WordPress of MMMs at this moment in time, in terms of like, it's just, we needed a I don't know, a neutral beacon to center the ecosystem?
Possibly
All
that
right.
might be a good analogy. I think, and I'm not 100% certain about this. Again, we should get the founders on,
Yeah,
but
definitely.
I would love to get the history of PyMC marketing, because there's other open source stuff they have too. But I think
Hmm.
I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg, but there's PyMC Labs, which I think created the open source packages for PyMC marketing. Um,
I see.
and
And
PyMC
that was
Labs
their
is a
their
consultancy.
revenue arm.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like, hey, we do MMM, we do kind of marketing attribution. What we do, what do we do?
Hmm.
Uh, the inventors of PyMC, the leading platform for statistical data scientists. We've launched consultancy to turn our expertise into our advantage. So yeah, they basically kind of built the open source package, and then they can also consult. So it's kind of like a like like DBT, right? Open source package,
Hmm.
but if you want the hosted version of it, come to us and we'll
Sure.
sell you that. So something maybe similar along those lines.
Interesting.
But again, they're
Interesting.
not
Okay.
Google, they're not Facebook, so you can at least be somewhat more confident that
Hmm.
their models aren't influenced by the platforms themselves.
And sorry, one of the things on the last screen you showed about Robin is it doesn't have custom priors.
No,
So how do you calibrate with an incrementality test then? You can't?
you can, yeah. With Robin,
Okay.
if you have an incrementality test, you can include that, and
Okay.
that in a way that acts as sort of a prior on the
Okay.
model,
Right.
because it basically
Yeah.
constrains the model to be close to the results of the incrementality test. Um,
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Um, I know we don't usually, and we never want to get vendor. Uh, it's important that we maintain a degree of neutrality, because I think it's important that we are able to review things with neutrality. But of the three open source packages right now, if someone comes to you right now and goes, "Build me this MMM," which one do you choose and why?
so I currently, Robin would be the easiest one for me to spin up and get started, right?
Okay.
Because it's the one that I've used the most. I
Sure.
have code sitting around that allows me to do a lot of the sort of mundane data cleaning, data prep, format it in the right way. And I
Sure.
can take a lot of the output of Robin, and I have some scripts that do some more fun stuff with that than the standard output you get from the model, from the package
Yeah.
itself. And it's easy to spin up and get running really quickly. I have less experience with PyMC marketing, and again, that's Python, which I bumble around with
Ah.
Python a little bit. So it's like one of
Yeah.
those where I just need a little bit more time to explore that and really get better suited with that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
Yeah,
Robin
that
is.
really is like the left hand side, right hand side driving of the modern world, is this Pi or sorry, is this Python or R scenario where look, they're both cars, but they are very confusing, and you're very likely to incur higher insurance premiums by getting in an accident early. Um, I have the proud ability to be able to drive on both sides of the road, and have only lightly tinkered with Python myself. But it is it's an interesting moment that we're at with these solutions, and I think we're seeing a lot of agencies, in particular, building their own solutions. I also look at this moment, and just from some of the things I'm hearing from folks, is we have almost had this, and harkening back to our conversation with Neil Hoyt, we've had this pendulum swing pretty heavily away from this deterministic MTA approach that we were all pretty gung-ho and bullish about for a really long time. And then we were just like, MMM to like die. I'm gonna get it tattooed on my forehead. Like that, there's like a degree of just like massive affinity about MMM at this moment in time. But one of the things I've seen is that it really, the more we lean into MMM, the more we are satiating of the three bodies of measurement of the way that I've always thought about them. There's machines, there's media managers, and there's CMOs or CFOs, right? So C levels. We are really leaning more and more toward the C levels, the CMOs, in terms of having I guess greater confidence around their budget allocations and those kind of things, which is really good on one hand that we're providing that level of, I think, executive confidence in terms of just what budget should I assign here. But we are moving further and further away from the media managers. And that's led to this really interesting, I think I've called it the MMM gap. And it is essentially, how do you transpose or how do you calibrate an MMM outcome with what a paid media manager needs to be able to do? Because if you say, let's move $10,000 from the bottom of the funnel on paid search to top of the funnel on YouTube, you tell that to them and then they go, so I'm going at a 1 ROAS on YouTube. How low can I go on this? And that's a very real concern. And I don't have a good answer for that in terms of calibration. It's sort of just like you're driving down the road with a blindfold on, and like every 100 feet someone says you're still on the road. And you're like, great, but I don't know how close that corner is. So I'm going to go really slow and maybe be really conservative, or I'm just going to bust through it and I'm going to wreck everyone's confidence in my ability to manage this channel. How are you thinking about the MMM gap right now, and how like folks should be solving for that as we are clearly moving further toward the needs of the CMO and away from the media manager?
No, that's the question that, it was on my mind for a long time, because I kept trying to think of reasons why MTA, multi-touch attribution, shouldn't be 100% thrown away and abandoned. And like, that was the thing that kind of that was like really the only thing that I kept thinking, like, oh, well, maybe like, because the managers of the channels need something to manage from day to day, week to week. And
otherwise all they have is in-platform.
Exactly.
And in-platform signals, we all agree, are like kind of made up, and the points don't matter.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that was how I was thinking for a while, is like, okay, so that's what you use MTA for, is just the daily and weekly, optimizations. But the term that's been around for a while now, and is probably very soon going to be like one of the next buzzwords, if it isn't already, is triangulation, which is we have our platform data from Facebook, from Google Ads, that's telling us our ROAS or our CPA is this. We have maybe Google Analytics that is telling us something else. And we have, we've done some incrementality testing that tells us, here's what the ROAS is from this test. And we have, and then we have MMM, if we've run MMM, and then MMM is saying, well, here's what MMM says. And so, the problem is that we're humans and we just want to be told, here's the answer. And it's not that easy, right? We have 4 different answers and they're all wrong. But how can we look at those and say, well, I have more confidence in this number being closer to truth, so I'm going to use that number right now. And so maybe that's MMM saying that Facebook has a ROAS of 6. And so Facebook and platform says it has a ROAS of 8. And so we're going to apply a multiplier to our Facebook ROAS number. So we can still use our platform numbers day to day, week to week, but we're going to be applying a multiplier to it. We're going to be knocking it down a bit based on what we saw from our MMM.
Isn't the challenge here, like in the scenario that I was presenting, where we're shifting budget from bottom of the funnel to top of the funnel, right? So we're now within the same channel, we're moving from bottom to top. So when we think about like the blended ROAS there, that snapshot number, or that multiplier that was provided, is only relevant to what the previous media mix was, and not the new media mix that's been created by this movement within there. And so I get that, like, there won't be like drastic overnight, like it won't drop off a cliff or anything like that, but it is a very real concern that I have, that we're still operating on this latent snapshot, and this idea of, look, I don't need real time, but I need something that like every few days is going to tell me if I'm still on the tracks. And so it's more of like is there some kind of, I don't know, model response curve here that's like, look, it's 99% sure that if you hit a 0.5 ROAS, you'll definitely be still within the green range on the diminishing return curve. If you hit 0.1 ROAS, maybe there's now only 60% chance you're still in the right diminishing return window. And then if you hit a -1 ROAS, then you've gone too far. We don't know exactly where it is in that window, because it may change and shift, but it's something. I'm just thinking about this, like there has to be some kind of model or some kind of approach that does account for that fundamentally different media mix that you've now created.
Yeah, I think, and this is something that, a lot of proponents of sort of the agile MMM, or what are the different names it goes by now? The
high velocity MMM, rapid MMM, punch you in the face MMM. There's variety.
Like that is one of the benefits, right? If you can get your data frequently, right? If you're getting weekly updates
Mm-hmm.
or even monthly, like you could do updates uh, frequently with the data. You could do weekly
Mm-hmm.
updates on the model. Um, that may be frequent enough to guide you, but I would say that I think that's, and this is where, I don't have, I'm not a media buyer, I'm not a media planner, I don't have that sort of
Sure.
expertise. So, but are they really making decisions that often about, is my ROAS too low? Should I cut this off, or should I spend more? Because I feel like that's something that if you're I would go down to like, how much are you spending in this channel, and how many channels are you
Mm-hmm.
spending such a significant amount that you need to know, am I below my ROAS target? Do I need to shut it off? Right. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and most of my experience is that there might be a handful of channels, maybe three, maybe four channels, where there's like enough budget in there that like we need to really have a good understanding of this channel. And then a lot of channels where there's like small amounts of budget, where, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
maybe we're
Mm-hmm.
above, maybe we're below, but like, is it a big deal? Not probably not as significant, right? And so I
Well, I
think if
think
you have that,
yeah.
yeah, if you have that, like if you think about it from sort of the, what are the decisions we're trying to make? Do we need to increase our budget in this channel? Do we need to decrease our budget in this channel? Or should we just hold it where it's at? And like, you can get that. I mean, that's a very high level view of things, right? And you can get that at the
Mm-hmm.
per channel level, or even the sub channel level, if you break it up in that level.
Right.
Um,
Well, and I think it has to be at the subchannel level in just in the ways that media managers operate. And uh, look, the ulterior motive of bringing this up is everyone and their mother is asking me about what I would frame as sort of hybrid MTA, which are these new wave of platforms, the North Beams, the Triple Whales, the even Rockerbox to a degree, right? Like there are these platforms now that the integration of deterministic signal is fundamentally predicated on this idea of more rapid changes. And I think what I'm getting at here is it's less about like mass budget changes at a moment in time, but it's about knowing when to maybe pull back on creative, or like this creative is not as effective as that was, we've now scaled up to a certain saturation point. Like those are the sort of flying blind moments where there are in-platform signals that may be telling you you're underwater. And you're like, yeah, I know all the alarms are going off, but it's fine because I know I'm operating in this range. And so, at least anecdotally, that's where I've seen those types of platforms come into play. And what's funny too is like when you see those types of platforms and folks use them, you do hear like, well, then what should I spend on this? I'm like, they won't tell you. Like that's not the point. And so it's sort of like they each have the inverse fault of the other in terms of being somewhat of a bottoms up approach here. So I'm just, I don't know. I'm curious as to your take on sort of like how do those types of platforms fit into this ecosystem? Do they?
you mean like the rocker boxes and the triple beams?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Um, I don't have, I've never used any of them, so I can't say
Mm-hmm.
firsthand, but I do like, uh, I do like what I see Rockerbox doing, and which
Mm-hmm.
is that they're sort of incorporating MMM into the mix, right? They're not just saying, okay,
Right.
we're doing MTA and we're all deterministic and all that. And they were smart about it because they focused on a very specific slice of it, right? It was Shopify
Yeah, where the data
e-commerce.
was sort of pre-constructed.
Exactly. And it's like,
Yeah.
probably most of it's digital data, and your ad data is not, including out of home or linear TV or radio,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. So it's very, from the actual model building perspective, it's a lot straightforward. You can cover 80% of the use cases pretty pretty easily. Um,
Yeah.
but again, yeah, I've never seen like the dashboard, like what you get from that, and how does it direct you, like, oh, spend more here, spend less there. I don't know what that looks like, but um,
Yeah.
I don't know. I would be, I guess, suspicious is too negative, but I would
Right.
always want to know, like, okay, why are you making this decision? Like, what's going on under the hood? How are you using these
Yeah.
signals? But that's just I mean, I tend to go more towards the open source anyway, because I want to know what's actually happening and be able to affect
Right.
that. But
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
very leery about just trusting a platform to say spend more, spend less.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but that's me.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially in the era of essentially AI ad buying, right? And so like one of the things I was thinking about a lot this past weekend was just, hey, we've had PMAX and Google's been around for a really long time. Bing, Google, Microsoft recently came out with literally, they called it PMax. It's the same name, which I was like, oh, that's very on brand. But no, although it's funny because Microsoft is sort of like leading the Gen AI play at this moment in time, especially as it pertains to like they are showing ads as part of Copilot. And I'm like, that's a really cool feature. How are we measuring this? Like it's this whole complicated realm of essentially now placement association in a SERP, and like what are those clicks more highly valued? Should they be treated the same just in terms of how that placement is being effective? But so those pieces, there's Amazon literally just came out with get this Performance Plus.
Yeah.
I feel like we're in like the stream, like these are like someone at some streaming TV company was like, here's the brand playbook, right? We're gonna say it's Max, or we're gonna say it's Plus. That's it. There's no other names except for like Peacock. They're just sort of like on their island being like, we're the Peacock. But everyone else is Max or Plus. And now I'm doing the exact same thing in our Gen AI ad campaigns. And what I'm wondering here is, because those are by nature, they have to be black box. There's so many optimizations. There's so many things happening simultaneously, and there's so many placement types that are leveraged as part of those. Is there even, one, how are we accounting for that in MMMs? And two, is there even a world in which it makes, maybe this answers that question for us on the MMM gap, because the reality is, you can't change anyway, because you need static inputs for at least a week at a time to allow the model to do what it's going to do. So how are you thinking about like those AI ad unit types, because they're only going to grow?
Yeah, I mean, from that perspective, I always segment those out from the channel. So instead of, when you build a model, you have your channels, right? And you could either say, okay, Google ads, Facebook ads, TikTok ads, those are your channels, or you could say Google branded search, Google non-branded search, Google PMax, right? You could break it out that way. So that I always recommend doing that. So you can at least see, how does PMax look in the eyes of the model versus your non-PMax campaigns, which if someone's only doing PMax, then I guess in that case, you just have PMax. So
the question to that is that resilient, or is that stable? Because I look at it right now and go, I don't think anyone's only doing PMax, but it is.
Well, that's what they want you to do though, right?
Well, I think they want you to do a healthy mix of broad and PMax, because there are sort of like learning considerations associated with how PMax is going to try and optimize based on what it can feed, based on what broad will feed it in terms of the essentially diversification of keyword strategy you can have. Right. But those are the two major places that we're seeing play. And then obviously PMax largely is predicated on e-commerce brands, but then there's like lead gen, which is essentially the PMax demand capture, the lead gen that's like a PMax play on the lead gen side.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that PMax can also kind of make a little bit more difficult is on the testing side, where you're trying to say, okay, I need to do a geolift experiment, and I need to not show ads to this location, in my branded paid search campaign, and only show them to these locations. And then PMax gets in there and says, oh, hey, I notice I could be spending a whole lot more in these locations that you just turned off from this campaign. So that just kind of gets in there and like completely ruins your test. So you have to be really careful when you're setting up your test and flighting that test to make sure that you don't have any kind of interference from the PMaxes or the other, campaigns like that.
Right. Like it lets you set it, but it will remind you, or it will ask you to re-add it. And that's a scenario where maybe one of the cooks was out of the kitchen for a day, and they come back and be like, yeah, of course we want to turn that on. And then they go back and do it, which is interesting. But it is, I don't know. I think that's probably one of the bigger, scarier things that I see coming toward the universe of MMM at this moment in time, of sort of the unknown functionality of advertising inventory. And I thought what was really interesting in the Google revenue, the financials that they shared in this past quarter, was that we did see the Google Display Network has continued this downward descent in terms of revenue associated there, but YouTube is all the way up. And so it's pretty clear that in the world of PMax, they are really pushing into these Google-owned and operated properties. And look, for good reason, because there may be better deterministic signals that are available in those environments, and therefore they can have a greater degree of clarity and certainty that they're serving the ad to the right person at the right time, all those good things. The challenge, though, inherently just comes in the form of any degree of any degree of measurement control here, and sort of acknowledging, like, even how do you start thinking about diminishing returns in a world of PMAX where there may just be massive troves of inventory that are uncovered at any given moment. So it's a little terrifying.
Yeah, I haven't thought about it from that perspective. When you say like massive troves of what was it? Massive troves
Of inventory. So
inventory, yeah.
because it's always learning and opening up different caves and chasms and finding different audiences, it may stumble upon a little hole right here and it might find a small few pieces of gold in there, and then it might tap onto another cave, and then it finds there's a ton of there's so much going on here, and it will shift budgets toward that point because it's going to be the most effective response. But then you're also saying, okay, well, I got to fuel this up. And so unlike maybe the traditional structure of how things would work based on like, here's the keyword, and it's pretty, unless there's like some major news event where that keyword is suddenly getting searched by everyone and their mother, or like seasonal effects, like people searching H&R Block, all those things around tax season. Those are sort of like these predictable caves or predictable deltas, moments of fluctuation. Now I think it's less predictable. And they're just like these interesting little factors. And also that's why some folks go like, I don't like PMAX. And you're like, well, it learns over time. Maybe there's an opportunity for us to like actually study the measurement of PMAX and how does that all work.
Yeah, I didn't realize that about PMAX, that it kind of like finds these pockets of opportunity over time, because like the way that I've thought about, objective based advertising, like you have an ad campaign, a Google ad campaign, and you've given it the objective of leads or sales, right? And you're just saying, here's my budget, go get me as many sales as possible with a ROAS of it, at least this.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it, what it's doing is, if you think about it like a triangle, right? At the top of the triangle are the most likely to convert audience, right? They're the highest, the chance that they're going to buy is really high. And so Google's going to give them the ads because they're going to buy. But that's also not incremental. They're the lowest incremental, right? Because they're already going to buy anyway. You probably didn't even need to show them an ad, but Google's going to show them an ad because they're the most likely to buy. So it's most likely to buy, least incremental. And then you get down to the base of the triangle, and it's like, as Google sort of exhausts the people who are most likely to buy, they kind of move down that triangle to the people who are like, a larger audience, but less likely to buy. But the ones who do buy are more likely to be incremental purchases. And so now that you've kind of explained PMAX to me, I'm thinking that kind of falls apart, right? Because it's like, how does
that's true when you have constraints on the system.
Yeah.
When those constraints are adhered to, exactly the model you described is true. It's when it's now in the area of PMAX that it's basically constraint removal. You provide seed audiences, seed assets, we do the rest. And I think that's also why there's just this inherent fear about it, which is healthy, but it's also, frankly, testing into areas that humans probably wouldn't have because they didn't look good initially. And, and you think about like sailing off and exploring the world, and you're like, yeah, there were no islands for 1,000 miles, better turn around. And you're like, you would never have discovered New Zealand if you'd done that. Like it's a moment in time of like, yeah, the machine is going to keep testing it.
Right. Well, and I've seen the skeptics on social saying that PMAX will basically like load a bunch of junk inventory, or spend a bunch of money on junk inventory, because like as long as they can just meet that ROAS that you're shooting for, they'll do that. So if they find some really good opportunity, then they can like backfill with some garbage, and on average, they're meeting your ROAS, but like it gives them a chance to like, what is this, like the new credit to default swap, right? It's like we're gonna package together a bunch of junk with the really good stuff, because we need to get this junk, we need that inventory, we need to get it off our books or something. I don't know what the analogy is.
Which is fundamentally true, but there's always the sort of constraint or caveat there of just you've never tried that junk before, you don't know if you'd like it, and so it becomes a little like, it's like, I don't know, with all that, like my kids, they're like, you just bundle a bunch of vegetables together. I'm like, you don't know if you'd like it or not. Like, I know there's some broccoli there. We've all agreed you don't like broccoli. But what about these carrots? What about broccoli when it's mixed with carrots with some cheese on top? And they're like, okay. And they find something they like. And so I think it's somewhat akin to that. But it does present a very real, very challenging measurement challenge. I need better words. But yeah, it's an interesting moment in time. So as we wrap up, what are your final thoughts right now in terms of MMM? Where do things go from here in the industry over the next year? Like, what are you most excited for, or like, what do you think a year from now will be true in the space of MMM?
Yeah, in the space of MMM, I would say that I think open source is going to continue to be probably the strongest growth in
Yeah.
MMM. I think you're going to see. I think we have seen even for over the past 3, 4, or 5 years, and I think we're going to continue to see even at an exponential rate new companies popping up doing MMM.
Okay.
Like me, like Causal Analytics. I mean,
Yeah.
I do it as a consultant.
Well,
But I think,
you're right.
yeah,
You're not trying to build another one.
yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of vendors, and we've already seen this, right? There's a lot of new vendors popping up every day. So I think you're going to
Hmm.
continue to see that, which is going to be interesting because I think a lot of them are probably just building off of open source.
Right.
Um,
They absolutely are.
and some of them are, they're not trying to hide it, right? They're just like,
No.
this is what we're using. We've forked it and we've made it better, but yeah, this is what it is.
There's still the fundamental barrier of accessibility associated with data preparation
Yes.
and marketing science support. And until that barrier is crossed, these plays make sense. I just think there's maybe too many of them at this moment in time. But this is what happens in the MarTech ad tech world, right? We see just this mass proliferation and then consolidation. It goes in like a 5-year cycle.
And here's the thing that's interesting and difficult, interesting, challenging, frustrating, exciting. I don't know, all of these things is that because there's so much like happening in this space, the prices are all over the place. Like, again, 10 years
Yeah.
ago, you would go to Northstar, Nielsen, whatever, you'd pay your several $100,000, and once a year, maybe once every 6 months, you'd get your big 88 slide deck report
Right.
of what's going. And now, I just talked to a prospect the other day who talked to, I think he said 11 or 12 different vendors, and he ended up having one that was going to be like between $20,000 and $25,000 for the model for the year. I think is probably what they would do.
Okay.
I don't want to
Yeah.
like call out names or anything, but like,
Yeah. But that's pretty cost
and
effective for
I've
the year, though.
and I've heard some that are cheaper than that. I know some vendors are closer to the, let's say, 75 to 100K range. I know some that are even still more than that. I mean, there's just such a wide distribution of the
Yeah.
costs, and also like, what are you getting for that? And it's just, it. I hate to leave marketers with like, not a good feeling, but like, if I were a marketer, I would not feel good about that because, like, as a marketer, you don't know. That's why you're trying to like
Yeah.
buy this or hire a consultant or find a vendor to do
Yeah.
this because you don't know how to do it. And the fact of the matter is, it's not a good time to not be an expert, because if you're going to pay that $50,000 or $100,000 and not
Right.
know what you're getting, not know how to understand if that's a good thing or not, maybe you know what we'll do. We'll put in the show notes like some good articles on like what to ask
Yes.
vendors that you're interviewing. Like,
Yes.
what
I
are
like
things
that.
to know?
Probing MMM
Yeah,
questions.
yeah.
Or maybe that could even be a good like topic. Like I bet there's a fun conversation that we could have around that in terms of let's talk about shopping for an MMM. And maybe even let's do it.
Yeah.
We could be like secret MMM shoppers. Who knows?
That would be good.
Well, I as always, Jim, have had a lot of fun chatting with you today, and I like this format. Maybe we'll try it again.
Yeah, I know we said we were going to try and do this like a short, like a
Right.
30-minute,
Snappable. Right.
and now it's 55 minutes in. But
I know. I realized that myself.
We could probably do shorter ones, but let us know in the comments. Find us on the Measure Slack, find us on our
That's right.
LinkedIn page, or go to our
That's right.
website, measureiup.show. Is that right?
That's right.
Thank God.
Measureiup.show. That's all you need to know. And we're going to have a theme song. We already got a theme song.
We do have a theme.
We're going to have a series of new theme songs.
Yeah.
I've got all kinds of just ridiculous things planned with Suno. So get ready. Get your eyes and ears ready. And if you're not watching this on YouTube, watch it on YouTube, because we had some fun screen sharing activity today that will probably help you follow along the conversation a little bit easier, because I was reading directly off a table and it may have sounded I was just sporadically calling out, what about this Bayesian thing? But no, it was actually structured.
Yeah.
All right.
Let us know if you like this format, or if you prefer the guest format, and we'll listen to our viewers.
All right.
And
Adios.
Simon, what do you do
Yes.
at the end of the day when your MMM is telling you your ROAS is 7.3, but your platform metrics are saying it's 8.12?
Oh my God, you love the numbers. In that scenario, I go out there and I look at 12 different M vendors, and they all have very different things to provide me, and I go, oh, it's time to measure out.